But if you identify a problem in your gun law or you see an infringement, the way you address the policy issue, I would contact, gun groups like Gun Owners of America locally. Say, hey, guess what? This is a problem. It needs fixing. And that's really what our I think we're pretty good at coming up with solutions to these problems. Now, we are the Armed Attorneys. Today, we're going to talk about what you can do to help to a movement in your state. Now, this is so important, and we get this question a lot. What can I do to help? I just need to get out my checkbook. Now, there's some more things that you can do. We're going to be talking about all that and more, but before we begin, show your support for the Second Amendment by hitting that like button. And this comes up a lot, especially whenever your state's in a legislative session. Hey, these scumbags are trying to do this, or hey, why won't they fix this? And a lot of folks, and this came essentially from a viewer. I'm going to read the question. They said, this is from Techie Josh. He says, what is the most effective method for advocating for good gun law reform in the state? I know GOA does amazing work in our federal courts, but how can we find and best assist people who are trying to fix the government overreach at the state and local level? He had a little bit of follow-up here. Also, is there anything you can suggest we do beyond financial in general, or is that question best suited for the organization once we find them? So, yes to all of those things. But, for Gun Owners of America, I'll just use them as an example. They are doing incredible work on the federal level, but, in maybe some of you know this, Emily and I are the legislative counsel for them for the state of Texas. We draft all their bills. We're down there lobbying for good gun policy. And so a lot of these groups have a lot of involvement in the states that you may not even know about. So, for example, if you are a Texan and you're not a member of GOA, you can support our efforts by becoming a member. I mean, it really does make a huge difference. But to that first question, there's a lot of things that you can do besides financial.
Sure. And the thing about it is that, yes, the groups, all the different firearms groups, the most press they get, the most publicity they get is whenever they file lawsuits, because as Americans, we always assume that we go to the court to fix everything. But lobbying, contacting your legislator, going out and, advocating, setting up a booth in front of the post office to push your materials, that is really where a lot of anti-gun stuff should be stopped, is, not in the courtroom, but in the legislative sphere. Because if you don't pass the law, then you don't even have to worry about going to court.
Yeah, and it does stink a little bit because, yes, giant federal breaking lawsuit, Supreme Court exploding. Yes, that's fun to report on. But the truth of the matter is, and I think it's an Indian proverb, I don't know, if you spend all your time pulling people out of the river, maybe you should stop and go upriver and figure out why people are falling in. I maybe have said that on the channel before, but that's what lobbying is, and getting the bad gun laws stopped, good gun laws passed at the front end. I get all the glory and all the things, but really the courts are supposed to be a fail-safe. They're not supposed to be kind of our first choice with these things.
I'm still pondering your old Indian proverb. So just to be sure, what river are you talking about? The Colorado River or the Ganges?
I'm not engaging in any of that.
Okay.
All right. But you look, and yes, this stuff is done really on the front end. Very, very important. Now, does financial stuff help? Absolutely. It really does, especially for lobbying efforts. And I'll say, and this is why I like GOA, we're not the wine and dine, blow members money on, taking lawmakers out to dinner, these kinds of things. Really all of the efforts go into good policy and spreading the message about what's going on. And I call it kind of the legislative triad, good policy, having access to lawmakers. And that could be, a couple of different ways. Lawmakers who are familiar with us because we're down at the Capitol all the time, or let's say you're a constituent in their district. And then the third one is grassroots pressure. And that's really where the most help comes in. Because look, I can only make so many phone calls or send off so many emails a day. But when you have it doesn't take that many. Once you have dozens of folks engaged in this stuff, it really does create a lot of pressure.
Yeah, and getting out, getting into the into the grassroots, getting out into the streets, it's a way to occupy your time. You meet a lot of nice people, a lot of like-minded individuals, and that's one thing people enjoy hanging around with people who are like-minded. So they don't have to be exactly like you, but you have issues that you coalesce around and go out and persuade people to your point of view.
Yeah, so going back to kind of those three different points, for the good policy, guess what? The way you engage that is if you identify a problem with your state's, let's say, gun law, and why are we talking about states? Well, that's where the vast majority of these things affect people. Yes, the federal government does a lot of things, causes a lot of infringements, but the most of your interaction is going to be on the state level, and that's why it's so stinking important. But if you identify a problem in your gun law or you see an infringement, the way you address the policy issue, I would contact, gun groups like Gun Owners of America, locally say, hey, guess what? This is a problem. It needs fixing. And that's really what I think we're pretty good at coming up with solutions to these problems. Now, to that second part about, access to lawmakers. Well, what can you do as a constituent? I wish somebody would have told me when I was younger that a lot of politics is just kind of meeting a lot of people early. You meet a lot of folks early at the early stages, and guess what? A lot of these folks go on to be very influential in your state level. So if you want to move the needle with gun politics, guess what? Get involved with your political organizations as early as you can, and you're going to see a lot of folks rise. Maybe it's you. Maybe you become the lawmaker. So that part, and then the grassroots stuff. How do you help there? Well, we kind of have a hierarchy of things, but sending emails, phone calls, writing letters, showing up at town hall meetings, showing up to testify in person when the legislature is in session, all those things, I'd say I'd rank those from kind of least important to most important. But that's where the grassroots gets involved, and that's where, you can really help.
Yeah, because believe me, the other side is doing it. I mean, all you got to do is go down to the
I'm on all their mailing lists. I see all the BS they say.
All you got to do is go down to the Texas legislature. If there's some sort of gun bill pending, you'll see all the mad moms in their red shirts.
Yeah, and the last thing that I think is worth mentioning is kind of skills-based volunteering. Once you find one of these home bases, like for us, it's Gun Owners of America, but there's tons of great gun groups out there. A lot of them need volunteers. Let's say you're really good at making websites, or you're really good with mailing lists, or you're great at making graphics, whatever it may be, or maybe you're, great at walking the halls in your state legislature and meeting stuff. You're completely fearless and can go talk to folks. Depending on your skills, your volunteer work can be really, really important as well. But we wanted to answer that question from you, the viewer, but we hope you enjoyed this discussion. If you did, consider subscribing, hitting that like button, and help us fight the anti-2A algorithm by sharing this video. And don't forget to leave your questions in the comment section down below. And until next time, we're the Armed Attorneys.